Good morning. How the devil... let me try it again. Good morning. How the devil are you doing this fine day? Good morning to Ken Hatcher, who's just popped into the chat as I started. How are you doing this morning? How do you feel about owing people money? Personally, if I owe somebody 20 quid, it plays on my mind. If I owed somebody £500, I wouldn't sleep. Why am I mentioning that? Because late last night I was sent the creditors list that details all the money owed by Squib Group to its suppliers. Now, bearing in mind the company turned over just under £31 million last year, how much do you reckon they owe? $1 million? $5 million? $10 million? Not even close. The company currently owes £23.3 million. I say good morning to William Forrest, who's just popped in as well. Where was I? Yeah, all of which, just to be clear, £23.3 million. Aside from the usual HMRC, they're always the biggest creditor in all these cases. The £2 million that Squib Group owes to and is disputing with the CMA, the company owes big money in several key areas, including waste disposal and labour agencies, which begs the question, why and how have these companies allowed the debt to grow so large? If you do a job, if I do a job for somebody and they don't pay, they're on stop. There is no discussion. They are on stop. I might work for them again if their debt is cleared, but I will probably ask for payment up front if I do choose to work for them again. Now, I realise that Squib Group is responsible for its own finances, but how have these firms allowed these debts to spiral out of control to this degree? Particularly when you think about, the debacle over Carillion a few years ago, surely we should now be keeping an eye on these things. Think about the safeguards that the gambling sector has put in place as an example. Let's be absolutely honest. The gambling sector is hardly a paragon of ethics, is it? Now, we'll get back to all of that in just a moment. But there's something else I want to do today. I'm going to do it after the show, actually. Just getting my brain in gear. There was a lot of chat on our WhatsApp group last night about the impact that a life in construction can have upon the families of those working within the sector. Gary Muirhead posted a really fantastic note that his daughter sent him years ago, pleading with him to come home for Christmas and the New Year because he'd spent a long time working away. Nigel Williams recounted the story of how his constant working away resulted in the breakdown of a 13-year relationship. But there will be pros, there will be cons. So I do have a banner for this. Let me show you what it looks like. There you are. Good or bad? How has working construction impacted on your family? As I say, good or bad? I'm sure it's putting a roof over your head and all that goes with it. But what is the impact on your family? Are they completely pro-construction or are they anti-construction because it means you're away an awful lot? And I'll be dipping that back up and down as we go along. Back to the chat. Andy here. Morning, Andy, from Northern Track. If I owe somebody £500, that's my problem. If I owe somebody £23 million, that is their problem. Poor credit control procedures. Yeah, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? It really does make you wonder. And there's Mick Saunders saying the write-up on Scrib regarding the CV8 makes some interesting reading. And somebody, I can't remember who it was, but somebody put on LinkedIn as a result of those figures coming out. The way that Squib Group is planning to resolve all of this is that they are offering 65 pence in the pound if the supply chain agrees to the CVA and allows them to pay back the debts over the next, I think it was 5 years. So 65p in the pound, which is effectively demanding a 35% discount on monies already agreed. And if you don't agree to that, then the company will dissolve into liquidation, at which point you'll get 1 penny in the pound. What do you say about the ethics of all of that? Love to hear from you on all that. So, without further ado, lots to get through today. Without further ado, let me get rid of that. Yeah. For the final time, without further ado, let me roll the question of the day, roll the intro as well, and get this show on the road. It is Wednesday, the 1st of November. And as Dan Cullen said earlier in the chat, pinch punch, 1st of the month. And hey, it is Happy Hump Day too. Yeah, pinch punch, 1st of the month, 1st of November. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. In today's show, the mighty Cat D11 surpasses a major milestone. Komatsu perfects the art of quarry loading efficiency. We're checking in with CJ Charlton to see their latest demolition project. And a Spanish eatery is eaten in a high-speed time-lapse film. Plus, Allu, you know Allu mixes it up. But first, we're going to peer back through the mist of time to see what was happening on this very day in history. On this day in 1348, the Black Death reached London. That wouldn't have been a good day. In 1604, William Shakespeare's Othello was first presented. In 1800, US president, I can't remember which president it was, but a US president, I've typed this wrong, but he became the first one to move in. It was John Adams. John Adams became the first US president to move into the White House. In 1848, a tiny little railway bookstore opened at Euston Station in London. That bookstore was called W.H. Smith. In 1928, the Graf Zeppelin airship set a new world record, traveling 6,348 kilometers. In 1967, one of my favorite movies, Call Hand Luke, was released. And on this day in 2021, it was announced that the global death toll from COVID-19 had passed the 5 million mark, although estimates suggest the total was actually twice as high. And have you been following the debacle of Dominic Cummings and so on down the line? I understand the repercussions and everything else, but I always thought that Michael Gove had the world's most punchable face. Dominic Cummings runs him a very close second, and I say that not as a Boris Johnson fan, but yeah, what a smug git. Yes, I would never tire of punching that head. Now, before we get into the real meat of the show, let me very quickly remind you of the question of the day. Yeah, question of the day comes once again from our friend Gary Muirhead. What book or movie impacted you most? And I've got several answers to that. Both the book and the movie Jaws really had an impact on me. Now, bear in mind that was 1975, I think. I would have been 10. I wasn't allowed to go and see the movie at the cinema, although I did. So my parents bought me the book. They didn't bother to check the book at all. It is horrific, and there's some sexy bits in it as well, which I thoroughly enjoyed as a 10-year-old. But the book and the movie left me terrified of the sea for years afterwards. My favourite book of all time, The Moon's a Balloon by David Niven, made me laugh more than any other, and also made me want to be a Hollywood star because he sounded like he had a great time. But I'm going to say my answer to Gary's question, I'm going to say there was a collection of writings by the former punk singer Henry Rollins, formerly of Black Flag. And that was the inspiration behind the book that I wrote, A Sight for Sore Eyes, which I wrote basically to raise money for the families of the Didcot disaster, almost 8 years ago, or 8 years ago in probably March next year. It was also the book that made me write more regularly and to ensure that I archive my writing because, you never know when you might need it again. But what about you? What book or movie impacted you the most? Has one made you laugh a lot? One made you cry a lot? Has any of those actually made you change the course of your life? Let us have your thoughts in the chat. We'll come back to that right after after the show. But I do need to pop back very quickly to the chat because there's lots going on. Dan Cullen says, you always see the companies go down owing millions. What does the taxman do about these millions? Pass it on to us, the taxpayer? Almost certainly. You wouldn't even see the 1p in the pound. The liquidators will exhaust every penny paying for their services and running down the money brought in. Been there, seen that many a time. Totally and 100% agree with you. And again, I'm going back to Dan's point there about HMRC. Because of who they are and what they are, they always get first dibs. So if they are owed £2 million and they manage to raise £2 million, they get theirs, you don't get yours. That's the way it works. No, that's for the end of the show. Tim Meany's just joined us as well from M&M Demolition. Good morning, Mark, and fellow demo friends. Yes, good morning to you, Tim. Let's get started, shall we? It is unquestionably the most iconic dozer in the entire world, and it has just passed a major sales milestone. This is the Cat D11.
Somebody really went to the ends for this dozer.
Really is some machine. 6,000 sold. A couple of things. Obviously, they're talking there about the legacy. That legacy is now being protected because they've now upgraded it to the XE edition, where it's got electric drive. It's still got a diesel engine, but it's got electric drive. So electric drive motors on the undercarriage. So that's one thing. But I was also thinking about this last night. There are very few equipment manufacturers that can be summed up with a single machine. Caterpillar, as an example, makes hundreds, if not thousands, of products, but the D11 is Caterpillar. It was the machine that adorned the side of their boots for years, if you remember that rightly. I guess the 3CX represents JCB and the skid steer just screams Bobcat, but I can't think of any others. Can you think of any machine? You see a machine and you think, yes, that's Komatsu, or that's Liebherr, or that's Hitachi, or whatever it might be. I think the D11, the 3CX, and possibly the Bobcat skid steer are almost unique in that respect. If you've got any thoughts on that, please let me know, because I'm sure I must have forgotten something. Now, let's have 6,000, not many of them. But when you think there's, I would imagine in today's money, there's probably a couple of million quid's worth of dozer there. And it is, I don't know if anybody else has ever actually seen a D11 in person. Good God almighty, they're big. Now, let's have a look. Gary Muirhead says, was lucky enough to have a go on a Thompson D11 when it was working on the M74 in Scotland. I'm fairly sure that Thompson's of Prudhoe were the first company in the UK to have a D11. Because I remember my old colleague, Adrian Barker, going to see that. Yeah, but Dan Cullen, 6,000, not many of them. I think it came out, and I'm doing this completely off the top of my head, I'm fairly sure the first D11 actually came out around about 77, 78. So not many, but there are not many applications that would demand a dozer of that size. Andy Darvell says, beast of a pusher. You're damn right it is. Again, having seen one up close, it just boggles the mind. Fantastic machine, fantastic company, and an absolute feat of engineering. So let's move on, shall we?
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
When your bottom line, sounded vaguely rude, when your bottom line hinges upon the ability to load and haul material with maximum efficiency, you need to know that your loaders and your haulers are perfectly matched, which is precisely where Komatsu comes in.
Hi, my name is Logan Schrader. I'm a Business Solutions Associate as part of our Business Solutions group here at Komatsu. Today I'll be talking about pass match analysis, specifically with loaders and haul trucks. So we're a team of application engineers. We consult on production analysis and operational analysis, specifically in the quarry sector. So customers ask us for a consultation. Quarries are ever changing, whether they're expanding, purchasing a new quarry, or just looking to make operational improvements. that's where we're here to help. So a real life example of this would be we recently had a customer in Illinois that was looking for an analysis between a 3-pass match loader or a 2-pass match loader. They were currently using a loader with a 7-yard bucket that was 3-passing and wanted to get our analysis on if a 2-pass match would provide significant savings for them. What we were able to find was in this particular case, eliminating 1 pass per truck was able to save our customer 16 cents per ton. So that may sound like a little, but being able to eliminate 1 pass saves you 45 to 50 seconds per truck, which equates to 6 trucks per hour and an additional 50 trucks per day. So that's 24 tons per truck on average. So you can see that as time goes on, that can add up to significant impact to the site. So in addition to consulting on potential sales, we're also consulting on operational improvements. The customer may have the right size fleet. Maybe they want to get analysis on their cycle times. Maybe they want to see if there's potential room for growth at the site, and that's where we come in to help. In addition to consulting on sales, we do try to meet the needs of our customers through remote options as well. So if there's a short turnaround time, we can surely do this remote and get the information to our customer that they need. If you're interested in an analysis from our group, it's important to reach out to your local distributor and they will get in contact with us and then we will get in contact with you.
Just going to pop back to the chat to talk about all things D11. Gary Muirhead, good morning, Gary, says the standard blade, this is the standard blade. This is not even the super big blade. The standard blade on a Cat D11, 28 feet wide. 28 feet wide, which if you think this office is, I don't know, 8 foot wide or something like that, more than 3 times the width of that. And Ken Hatcher has just confirmed the cost of a D11, $2 to $3 million. So yes, you wouldn't need to sell too many of those. William Forrest, good morning, William, from the Attachments Company up in Barney, Scotland, says 6,000 units of a dozer. That size seems quite a lot, considering the specific applications. Yet there are very few companies that have actually used them, would be my guess, in general construction. You know, they're generally a mining and quarrying machine. Although I know, as I say, Thompson's Proto had one working in construction civil engineering here in the UK. Who's got one at the moment? Stokey have got one as well. I think they've got their second over in Switzerland. Eberhard have had a couple over the years, but it is an absolute monster of a machine. So yeah, let's have a look. Gary Muirhead says Komatsu wheel loader is my second choice behind Cat. Quite right too. Nice kit, the Komatsu's very informative. Yeah, there is a real science. I mean, I've actually got here. I remember being sat with Leverton sales reps selling Caterpillar equipment back in the day when they were trying to convince a customer to buy certain excavators, certain trucks, certain wheel loaders, and so on down the line. And everything was calculated on scraps of paper. Now there is a program for it, or there's an app for it, should I say. Chris Ford has just arrived. Good morning, gang. Why does everyone ring at 10 o'clock? Because they like to spoil your fun, Chris, but good of you to join us. I've got my phone on silent at the moment, so even if somebody does ring me, they've got no chance. Now, let's have a spot of this, shall we? I do have something else to show you in a second, but I think I've just answered this question myself. Good morning, gang, says Chris Ford. Why does everyone ring at 10 o'clock? Dan Collins says, I have that issue too. Bearing in mind, this show was basically designed to fit around the morning break on demolition and construction sites. So I'm guessing that a lot of people actually believe that this is a break time and therefore now is the time to phone. It's no longer a break time. People have things to do. They have to watch this show. Don't have to, they have a choice, but you know. And now I do like to drop by CJ Charlton every once in a while, partly because they do demolition right and with the minimum fuss, but also because they do make really good videos. This is a bit like the CJ Charlton fan club, isn't it? Dan Cullen says, love the excellent condition the machines are kept in. And that, to my mind, that absolutely typifies the way that Chris Charlton and his team go about their business. They just do things right. It's not a lot to ask, I wouldn't have thought. Andy Darvell says, lovely looking machine. How long till that gleaming white counterweight gets a few battle scars? I would say quite a while. Not only are the operators that Chris has employed very, very good indeed, he also takes very good care of his machines as well. Good driver says, Ken Hatcher, look at the sprockets. I was looking at the attachment, but he was looking at the sprockets. Mick Saunders, this pretty much sums up my feelings as well. Got a lot of time for Chris Charlton. No rushing about with him. He just gets better each year. That's not a bad thing to aim for, is it? Gary Muirhead says, looks like that operator really looks after his machine. Well done. Personally, I think that's a joy. It shouldn't be unusual. I realise it is. It shouldn't be unusual. But when you go and see Chris, you go and see Armac, for example, you go and see AR Demolition, and their machines are pristine, it's because they've empowered their operators. You know, it's one man, one machine. Look after the machine, and the machine will look after you. And doesn't it look fantastic? And I realise nobody wins demolition work based on aesthetics. I don't suppose one moment any client is looking at that video thinking, aren't those machines lovely and pristine? But it does go a long way. Good question, Andy Darvell. Depends on the operator, rather hopefully longer than most. Let's have a look. And yet another oil quick hitch. Quite right. Right. Lots of answers to our question today, or Gary Muirhead's question today. But before we get to all of that, we need a spot of this.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
I said I was going to post that banner regularly through the show. I haven't, but we are nearing the end of the show. So very quick reminder, we've obviously got our question of the day. What movie or book rather impacted you the most, either as a young person or later in life? Plenty of answers on that. But my supplementary question of the day was, good or bad, how has working construction impacted on your family? Impacted on your family, not necessarily you. Now, obviously, I've already said this, it puts a roof over your head. Hopefully it puts food on the table as well. Is it all good? Is it partly bad? Is it all bad? Love to hear from you on that. I'm going to leave that up for just a second while we crack right on. Now, Mick Saunders just said, no, Chris, I wouldn't like to go and say, sorry, mate, I've got a scratch on the machine. The bloody thing will be in for a complete respray quicker than you could get out of the gate. Yes, and isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Take care of the stuff. Right, now, for decades, the Buffalo Grill was the go-to destination for Spaniards seeking a hearty American-style meal. But now, the grill itself has been eaten. Do love me a demolition time lapse. Still got answers coming through to our other question of the day, good or bad, how has construction impacted, or how has working construction impacted your family? We'll take that off for just a moment while we go over to, when I can find the right button, get that off the screen, and we're going to go over to the penultimate thing, I think.
If you would like to buy a limited edition Break Fast show sticker, head on over to buymeacoffee.com/demolition news/extras.
And we're going to play out today with an attachment, the likes of which I have never seen before. It's called the Processor, and it comes from those fine folks at Allu. It's not Allu, as I used to pronounce it. It is Allu. It looks a little something like this. Imagine the size of the cake you could make with that thing. Aside from baking, anyone have a suitable application in mind for the processor? Love to hear from you. While you're doing that, that pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show, although the fun and games are only just about to begin. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into the chat to see what you're all saying today. If you can't stick around, please stay safe. Stay safe, particularly today, because Storm Kieran is going to be blowing your wig off in the next couple of hours. If you can't stick around, please, as I say, stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Batten down the hatches. But if you do have the time and the inclination, please stick around. The Craic will begin immediately after this final word from our key show sponsor. Right, set the music volume. Sounds about right. How are we all doing this morning? I'm going to go right back to the beginning of the chat because I think the depth is at the end. So let's go back to the very beginning. Who was first off the mark? Mark Whiting was first off the mark this morning. Good morning, Mark. Hope you're fit and well, my friend. Good of you to join us. Gary Muirhead, provider of all questions for all eternity, apparently. I don't know where he keeps digging them up from. I'd like to think that I'm not impacting on his family life, but he does send them to me at some rather odd times of the day, so I do wonder. Gary, thank you once again. Dan Cullen says, morning. Yeah, morning to you as well, Dan. Hope you're fit and well. Feel like I need to do this with an accent, but I'm not good at accents, so I'm just going to say, all right, my lovers, from Andy Dovell. Morning, Andy. There's Dan Cullen, Pinch Punch, first of the month, and it's Happy Hump Day too. I couldn't honestly believe. I went to type part of the script today, and I always say it is whatever the day is, and it was only Wednesday. It feels like it should be Friday, Saturday, possibly. Mick Saunders says, good morning, one and all. Good morning to you, Mick. Hope you're fit and well. Ken Hatter has joined us all the way from Welsh, Wales, where I think they're about to get some weather as well. There's our friend William Forrest up in Bonnie, Scotland as well. Morning, William. You and I need to have a chat. I realise I've kind of let the ball drop, but we do need to have a chat. So, as I said, lots to discuss today. And yes, Mick Saunders says, Mark, the write-up on Scrib regarding the CVA makes some reading. It really does. Yeah, £23.3 million in the hole. And I find myself oddly torn with this. I've said from the moment that we announced, or that we broke the news, that Scrib Group was filing for a CVA, that I'm a fan of Scrib Group. I like Les Scrib a lot, and that remains the case. But a couple of weeks ago, I was criticising the house builder Vistry, who you might recall had gone back to their supply chain and demanded, and they demanded a 10% discount going forward. So regardless of what they were paying you today, henceforth they wanted a 10% discount, which I thought was a bloody cheek. The CVA that Squib Group and their legal team rather are trying to push through requires a 35% discount on monies already owed. So a 35% discount. I mean, effectively, they are offering you 65 pence in the pound if you agree with their terms on the CVA, and it's 35% discount payable over a period of, I'm fairly sure it said 5 years. I've not got it in front of me. I'm fairly sure it's. So not only are you allowing a 35% discount on monies that they already owe you, you're also agreeing to wait for up to 5 years to get your money back. And all of that hinges upon them being able to come up with somewhere between £100,000 and £160,000 per week to repay the debt. What do you think about that? Now, I said the fact that I can't sleep if I owe somebody money. I don't even abide by 30 days payment. If somebody bills me and the money's in the bank, they get their money, regardless of all that. Ken Hatcher says, same as me. Yeah, I can't. And I understand the notion of sort of 30 and 60 day payments and all that kind of thing. But if you've had the service, you've got the money, pay the people. Would that not be a good idea? Question of the day. The other question of the day, which was, I'm fairly sure I can put this up now. It's that one. Good or bad, how has working in construction impacted on your family? And Gary Muirhead said, no, that's not the one. Where were we? Lost my place. It was a bit further on than that. Here we go. Gary Muirhead, question of the day. It's given me and my family a good standard of living, but it's come at a cost by missing out on lots of family occasions. And that was kind of the point that I was getting at. I still get it in the neck from time to time, and I know she's listening, and I know this is going to remind her, but I still get it in the neck for having missed birthdays and sports days and open days and stuff when my children were young. My twins were pretty much newborn when I jetted off to America for 10 days, which it was work, it was paid and everything else, but with the benefit of hindsight, was that necessarily a good idea? No, it wasn't. Was missing birthdays a good idea? No, it wasn't. Was the fact that I used to work very late into the evening in an office away from the house, so by the time I got home, my wife had bathed, fed, read nighttime stories to the kids, and they were all tucked up in bed, and I strolled through the door. You know, basically, I'd been sat on my arse all day. Doesn't seem fair. So what has been the cost to you guys? Love to hear from you. Jim Turner is here as well. Morning, Jim. Hope you're fitting well. Hope you enjoyed the music on the Allu processor, because I chose it especially for you. Why do they have financial advisors and a financial department? Yeah, see, there is the thing, and cards on the table. A couple of years ago, I had some some significant financial issues of my very own. And I wrote this recently, that there is a term, spiral of debt. And until you've actually experienced it, you probably don't realise just how right that term is. I got to the point where I owed people money, and it didn't matter how much I worked, I seemed to go further and further and further into the mire. But yeah, you've got companies, not only Squib Group, you would have thought that their own in-house accounts department would have said, we have an issue here, we have a black hole, but also the companies they owed money to. There was one, and I'm trying to remember, is it Jesus, the waste company? I think they owe them like £750,000. You would have thought, but at some point, somebody at that company would have gone, hang on, this debt's getting out of control, and yet they didn't. And we've had lots of warning on this. You know, I mentioned it earlier. You know, we've had the Carillion debacle. What was that? A couple of £100 million that they owed. And you know, we know that, and we know that money gets away from people. And one of the things that concerns me, this does come up in the chat a little bit later on, so I'm going to preempt it now, is there are lots and lots of small suppliers in there. including some that will have, bearing in mind what this show is all about, but some of those smaller debts relate to equipment being sold, equipment being rented, and so on down the line. And I know from past experience of companies that have kind of leaned on their attachment suppliers, for example, and said, we're in a bit of a hole. Any chance we can do a deal or extend the payment terms or whatever it might be? And the attachments company or the equipment company has said, yeah, okay, we will work with you on this in the hope that we will all come out the other side. Who's to say they will come out the other side? And the other point, obviously, is there's lots and lots of big names in there. As I say, waste companies, recruitment companies, and all of those kinds of things. There's leasing companies who are owed a fair old fortune as well. But it's the little companies, the little suppliers of specialist products, the little suppliers of specialist services that might only be owed a couple of £1,000, 5,000 quid, 10,000 quid. But if you're that size of business, that is potentially enough to take you under, which does come up a bit later in the chat. Gary Muirhead continues his secret romance with my wife. Not that secret, I can see it going on. Andy Hare says, if I owe somebody £500, that is my problem. If I owe somebody £23 million, that's their problem. Poor credit control procedures. Yeah, I guess one of the issues that we have here, and I have mentioned this before, I wonder, and I'm trying to remember the context that I put it in. I know what it was. When I was talking about this previously, I was talking about DIDCOT. I realise that's got nothing to do with finance. But we are soon going to be at the 8-year mark with DIDCOT. It would be sensible, in my head, it would be sensible if the HSE, Thames Valley Police, whoever it might be, had come up with some preliminary findings. And I would say the same about spiralling debt. Companies are required to report to Companies House their accounts and everything else. But the problem with this is we've got a situation now with Squib Group who, as I say, owe 23.3 million. But if you are Joe Blogg's attachment company, you have no idea that they are £23 million in the hole until they enter a CVA and you are added to the creditors list. It's only then that you realise that they owe the taxman a fortune, that they owe the CMA £2 million, or they are disputing that. And that you have no inclination of that. I'm sure, bearing in mind the desperate need for transparency in all walks of life, surely it should be like a Freedom of Information Act. And I do wonder about, I know there are credit checks and all that kind of thing, but I'm sure if anybody had done a credit check on Squib Group in the last 6 months, surely you would see a £23 million hole, and surely you would think twice about doing business. And yet, when all is said and done, I'd really quite like them to make it back, even though the idea of a 35% discount sits very unkindly. Why does it make some reading? We are a close-knit community. I think many of us will read between the lines. Indeed. I've had lots of... Obviously, I had the message from Mark Coleman, who is not particularly keen on my coverage of the Squib Group debacle, but I've had an awful lot that are very keen on my my Squib coverage, so swings and roundabouts. Ken Hatcher says, I've worked long hours years ago, but never worked away. And maybe that is it. Maybe that is exactly the problem. And I did say that we were going to come back to this. I feel sorry for the small one-man band that will probably push them over the edge and put them out of the game. And again, I realise, if you're a small company, if you lose 500, 5,000, 50,000 pounds, it's a bad deal. But right now, here we are, the 1st of November. I'm sure somebody will be able to tell me how many shopping days we've got until Christmas. Let's say it's 55 shopping days till Christmas, and you've just been told that rather than the likelihood of you receiving that 5,000, 10,000 pounds, you've now got to agree a CVA, which means that you will get your money in dribs and drabs over the next 5 years. And to those small companies, that means going home to the missus or the partner or the spouse or the girlfriend or whatever, saying you might want to put a stop on the turkey, And that bike that we're buying young Johnny, that's out the window as well. That's the actual impact of this. You know, it's all very well to talk about CVAs and the HMRC and accounting practices and everything else, but when it comes down to it, what we're talking about here is actual people that have done the work or supplied the product or supplied the service and are now not likely to get paid, or certainly not get paid what they were owed. That's what we're talking about. Question of the day: what book or movie impacted you the most? You'd think I'd be able to spell the word "you," wouldn't you? Rather than "OU." I said there's been lots of standouts. Jaws terrified me. But the one that really stands out, and it was perfectly timed. I'd read this anthology of writing from Henry Rollins. Used to be the lead. I use the term singer advisedly because he was more of a shouter. But Henry Rollins, formerly of the punk band Black Flag, who used to write for, or still does, write for the New Yorker and New York Times and the Washington Post and all these things. And he pulled together what he considered to be the best of his writings and self-published them. And I bought the book and thoroughly enjoyed it. He does a lot of travel. He goes to really weird places in the world. To give you an idea, I'm trying to remember, he was in somewhere where a war had just begun. I can't even remember which country he was in. And he left the hotel and he was stopped by an American security guard saying, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Well, I'm going over there." And they said, "Well, that's where the fighting is." And he said, "Yeah, that's where the people are. That's why I'm here. I want to meet the people." And that's what he does. So all of that aside, he did this anthology. I read it probably just after Christmas in 2016. And literally a couple of months later, Didcot happened. And I had all of this back catalogue of things that I'd written over the past few years. And I funnily enough, I actually made a phone call to Mark Coleman. And I said, "Look, I've got this idea to raise money for the families of the guys impacted. Would you have any issue with me producing the book?" He said no. So I went ahead. Fred designed it. I put it together. We got it self-published and everything else. And we sold a good few thousand. We sent a few £1,000 to the families involved. So, that was the inspiration behind A Sight for Sore Eyes. Funny how here we are 8 years later and Mark Coleman is rather less of a fan. Hey, what are you going to do? You always see these companies that go down owing millions. What does the taxman do about these millions? Pass it on to us, the taxpayer. Yeah, in the ultimate scheme of things, yeah, that's exactly what they will do. Andy Hare rightly says you wouldn't even see the 1p in the pound. The liquidators will exhaust every penny paying for their services and running down the money brought in. Been there, seen that many a time. And the other question, of course, is as we reported yesterday, I think it was, both Kelpray and Squib Group are planning to, or they are disputing their fines from the CMA over the bid rigging and price fixing, the £60 million in fines that were handed down earlier in the year. And the date for the tribunal for both, they're both going to be heard together, is April next year. What of Squib Group will be left in April next year? I'd like to think all of it, but is that going to be the case? I don't know. We shall see. Jim Turner. On the subject of work and working away, my first day of employed work was at 16, was working away from home with a fella I'd only met twice. I had about 4 years mostly working away. It took me all over England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. It was sound at the time, but I'd only do it as a last resort nowadays. And I'm fairly sure somebody else says this a bit later on. It is, or it may have been from the WhatsApp group. I do think that idea of working away when you're young, and I do mean properly young, not such a bad thing. I mean, I think it would be, potentially could be the making of you. You know, you've got to be very self-sufficient. And 16 seems very, very young, but you've got to be self-sufficient and self-disciplined and everything else. But I think the moment that you start to have the trappings of a family life, be it girlfriend, wife, husband, boyfriend, fiance, whatever it might be, and particularly when you stir children into the mix, that's when that starts to become a problem. Okay, love to have your thoughts. Question of the day 2. If I hadn't been taken the path down the operator route, I would have loved to have been a lorry driver after watching and loving the movie Convoy. Still have the passion for trucks. there's a little bit of me that quite fancies that, but not here. That's the only trouble. Convoy, obviously set in the US, and traveling around Australia. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. I do have a weird thing about sleeping in relatively small spaces, and the idea of driving a truck, getting into the sleeper cab, and bedding down for the night, that really, really appeals to me. I'd probably go out of my mind in about a week, but that really appeals to me. Tim Meaney from M&M Demolition. Good morning, Mark. Fellow demo friends. Good morning to you, Tim. Hope you're fitting well. Hope there's plenty of work coming in down at M&M. There is Gary talking about the D11. Lucky enough to have a small go on the Thompson D11 when it was working on the M74. There used to be a D11 in Malaga, the Caterpillar Proving Ground in Malaga, and I did ask if I could have a go on that once. They laughed. Probably rightly. I could have flattened Malaga before they got me off it. Beast of a pusher. Yes, you're absolutely right. Lots of talk about that. Some of these Asian machines look like Cat 360s. Yeah, I have to say the first generation of Lugong excavators that I saw here in the UK did, from a distance, look an awful lot like a previous generation Cat. Yeah, that puts it into perspective. Standard blade on a D11, 28 feet wide. Try and find a parking space for that somewhere in London, but it really is an absolute beast of a machine. And as I say, they now have the XE with the electric drive motors as well. William Forrest says 6,000 units for a dozer that size seems quite a lot, considering the specific applications. Yeah, when you think about it, there will not be that many mines in the world. There's not that many quarries in the world, and there are not many, or there are certainly not enough civil engineering projects big enough to justify a D11 or two. So back to the original question of the day, the Gary Muirhead question of the day, about movies and books that have impacted you. Mick Saunders says Schindler's List, but trying to get to see Anthony Hopkins' new film called One Life. Bit biased, but I was introduced to a couple of people he saved by my nan years ago. The man Nicholas Winton was a saint. Not sure about that film. I've not heard about that. But if it's got Anthony Hopkins in it, I'll damn well watch it, because Anthony Hopkins, greatest actor of all time. He'd certainly be my top 2 or 3. So look forward to seeing that one. Komatsu wheel loader, my second choice behind Cat. Nice kit from Komatsu and very informative video. There is Chris Ford. Good morning, gang. Chris, you'll be pleased to know that your backpack is now winging its way to you. Took a while. I don't like to go to the post office in the rain, basically. That's all it is. Question day. Now, here is another area of agreement between myself and Jim Turner. Has to be It's a Wonderful Life. It's a perfect story with a solid meaning that's perfectly acted out. A pretty close second is Tombstone, more specifically the scene in Tombstone where Doc says he's there because Wyatt Earp is my friend, and he doesn't have many friends. It's bringing a tear to my eye just thinking about the scene. Makes me cry every time I watch it. Just so powerful. With friends, it's quality over quantity. Totally agree on Tombstone, and seriously, Val Kilmer's performance in that is a masterclass. But It's a Wonderful Life, I don't know how I managed it. Bearing in mind it was made in the 40s, I guess, with James Stewart in the lead role. I'd seen bits of it, and I vaguely knew what it was about, but I went to the States in the run-up to Christmas one year. Let me think, it would have been 1989, because it was a year before I got married. And I decided, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Christmas movie. I'll watch that. Watched it, cried me bleeding eyes out. Absolutely cried my eyes out. And it is, bearing in mind what we've been talking about today about Squib Group and debt, it's not the main story within It's a Wonderful Life, but there is the debt and the escalation thereof. And if you haven't seen it, trust me, and Christmas is coming up, there is no better film, and I do mean this, there is no better film to sit down and watch with the family at Christmas. What's the other one that I always watch at Christmas time? Love Actually. I'm getting ahead of myself. I complain about people putting their Christmas decorations up too early, and here I am, 1st of November, discussing Christmas movies. Glenn Johnson, good morning, everyone. A bit late today, not a problem at all, but go and stand in the corner, Glenn, and we'll give you lines afterwards. Love the excellent condition. Yeah, lots and lots to talk about CJ Charlton there. And yes, they really do take very, very good care of their machines. Jim Turner comes back and says, life is beautiful. I don't think I've seen that. Also a very powerful film, very well done. If you watch it, you will feel wrecked emotionally afterwards. Have your hanky to hang. There's a thing, I find myself, maybe I'm just growing soft in my old age, I do find myself more easily moved to tears in my older years. I mean, even an advert about poorly treated donkeys on the telly, if I'm in the wrong mood, that comes awfully close. Is that an age thing, or is that just a me thing? I'd love to know. No, we've done that one. Dan Cullen says, working in construction has little impact on relationships, but I'd rather go to work than sit twiddling my fingers. Listen, we've all got bills to pay, and I fully understand the sentiment there. But if you are in a relationship of any description, I would imagine that, and bizarrely, we've had this discussion before. We've had this discussion about the impact of working in demolition and construction upon the mental health of those that are actually doing the work. You know, this idea of being away for prolonged periods of time, potentially away from friends, family, support networks, and everything else. But what about that support network, specifically the people for whom you are the breadwinner? You know, we talk about the mental health of somebody sat in digs or sat in a crappy old caravan for weeks upon weeks upon weeks while they earn money for the family. But what about the family that's back home, where the wife is taking care of the kids day in, day out, completely alone? What about that? Andy Darvell says, the film that affected me most was Nightmare on Elm Street. I watched it when I was far too young, and my older sisters and I had nightmares for years. Freddy still pops up in my dreams from time to time. Wasn't that Freddy's shtick anyway, popping up in your dreams? And just a small random fact, I don't know if anybody else realises this, but Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, was Johnny Depp's first movie. It came about almost entirely by fluke. He was friends with a guy called Nicolas Cage. And Nicolas Cage said, you should try acting. You're a pretty good looking fella. You should try acting. I'll introduce you to my agent. He got introduced to the agent. Agent said, we have a very small part in a slasher movie called not Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. He went along, he got the part, died a very unpleasant death in the movie. The career of Johnny Depp was born right there. Well, that's how you strip a house to bare existence. Ain't that the truth? Mick Saunders says, over the years, I've seen a lot of good and bad impacts to family life. Sorry to say mostly bad in my day, but it's a way of life. Once bitten by demolition, it's the same as being bitten by Millwall. Is it? I can only imagine that being bitten by Millwall would give you some sort of infection. But no, it's a good point. It is a good point. And I know somebody on the WhatsApp group suggested, as it turns out, it was wrong, but I think somebody had said they'd seen a statistic that construction was one of the highest, the industry was an industry with one of the highest levels of divorce. I've checked, it's not even in the top 10, but you can certainly imagine it would be. Dan Cullen, never had an impact from a movie or book, to be honest, but I'm a bit of a weird one. Listen, that doesn't make you weird. Horses for courses and all that kind of thing. But even more recently, and I'm probably going back probably 10 years, I read The Book Thief. If anyone's ever read that, there's a movie as well. Not as good as the book, but that's often the case. Read The Book Thief, enjoyed it that much. It's basically set in Nazi Germany, and it's written from the perspective of death. The Grim Reaper. It is written from his perspective. And I enjoyed it that much that I bought half a dozen copies and gave them to friends. It was that good. Jim Turner says, I'd say being in construction has been great for my family. It's kept them in the lap of luxury that they've become accustomed to. Saved us a fortune because I can do most things myself, so I don't need to pay other people. And it's meant my son has dropped onto an apprenticeship because he spent most of his life already doing it, working with me at weekends and evenings. It's a swings and roundabouts. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, whenever you watch these TV adverts for the armed forces, you know, if you can fix a bicycle, you can fix a whatever, and you can fix a helicopter. Construction's exactly the same. It does give you the grounding to be able to do a lot of stuff. I don't think the Volvo had an oil quick hitch, did it? I need to go and have a closer look, I think. Question of the day. I think, Chris Ford says, when I was younger, I'd pick a book up, read it cover to cover over a couple of days. These days, I've never seemed to have the time. Biographies used to be my favourite. Always intrigued to learn how people dealt with the adversities they encountered in their lives. Not so much adversity, but if ever you get the chance, please go and read The Moon's a Balloon by David Niven. Bearing in mind he lived for a while in his early days in Hollywood with, what's the bloody guy's name? Errol Flynn. Swashbuckler and womanizer to the stars. It is an astonishing read, honestly. Dan Cullen, I'm going to try and do the effect for you here. Dan Cullen is on a breaker today. I hope that came across. Exactly why the small business ends up going out of business, being bullied by the big players. Yeah, well, bullying is one way of putting it, and I know somebody on LinkedIn described it as blackmail earlier. I can't see it happening. Still go down the pan. I hope not, but I still think they would. HMRC, but not very happy. William Forrest shouldn't be able to bully the small business owners into accepting that level of discount. But what other choice do the creditors have, sadly? That is the point, isn't it? Chris Ford, question of the day. I got it wrong. Not sure what that is. I find it funny that when you ask for a raise, they say no, but they have 4-5 mental health advisors. What for? I've yet to have a chat with one of them. Never see them as a productive person to work. And so many foremen in one job for only a few men. Ain't that the case? Graham Footy Williams says, if I can't come home to my own bed at night, I'm not interested. Yeah, unfortunately, though, that doesn't necessarily work, does it? Love to read books, but it wasn't to be. Audiobooks. I now find, well, there you are. Precisely the point from Chris Ford. I'm obviously not doing it now, but when my father was ill and I was travelling down to Worthing 2 or 3 times a week, I was consuming audiobooks on the journey there, hour and a half there, hour and a half back. I was going through audiobooks like they were going out of fashion. Absolutely love them. And in absolute truth, there have been several that I've done where I've as you know, I'm a big Stephen King fan, but I've actually bought the hardback and never actually opened it because I've also listened to it on audiobook. And in some ways, the audiobook sometimes better than the actual book. Onto an apprenticeship, it's not the same. Gary Muirhead, why does this always happen around Christmas time when people need the money more? Well, if you were here, I don't know, you were, Gary, Neil Edwards popped by earlier in the week and he did actually have an answer. I'm not sure it is the answer, but he had an answer for that. Now is the time of year when it all comes home to roost, basically. Neil's suggestion was that we're now at the point of the year where some clients and some tier 1 contractors are looking at a new project start, and rather than saying yes, we will go all guns blazing for the next 4 weeks before we shut down for 3 weeks, they're saying no, put it on hold, mothball it, we'll start after Christmas or we'll start after the new year, which means that in some instances you're going to have a bit of a black hole in your workload. So rather than working as you have done for the other 11 months of the year, work flat out in January, February, March, April, you get to the end of October, beginning of November, and all of a sudden the gap starts to widen, and that does, the gap starts to widen, but you'll need to make your payments on tax, insurance, fuel, wages, lease payments, and all that kind of thing. They don't take a holiday. They don't take a Christmas break. They come rain or shine, and that unfortunately seems to be the impact. But the point is, you know, and I know we're talking very much today about, I can lose that now. I know we're talking very much about the impact of the current situation at Squib on those outside the company, but what about those inside? You know, you've now got a situation, and I don't know how many people Squib Group currently employs, 50, 100 maybe, I don't know. It doesn't really matter how many it is, but they will be looking at this now, hoping and praying that the companies on the Squib Group creditors list agree to a CVA in the hope that they might still have a job going forward. But if they don't, they're now going to be looking for work, and they're going to be looking for work, as I've just said, at a time of the year when I wouldn't say work has dried up, but work is being pushed back to the new year. So, you know, you could be very easily looking at 6 weeks, maybe 2 months unemployed, and that's still saying that things pick up in the new year, bearing in mind the current situation with the economy and everything else that's going on in the world. There's no guarantee of that. Dan Cullen says, question mark, do you keep dates on when people start watching the show? Could have a 1 to 2 year anniversary of being on the show. I wish I had. The problem, Dan, and this is my complete lack of foresight, I'm criticising others, but my complete lack of foresight. One thing, I never kept a note of questions of the day to make sure I didn't run them again. And the biggest one was I never kept a register of when people started watching the show. And for good reason. Those, Gary and Ken will tell you, I was expecting this show to last 2 weeks, not 3 years, not 3.5 years. Andy Dovell says, other questions are good and bad. Good, that I own a good crust and have a good life. Bad, that my daughter always says she doesn't see me enough, and that is hard to hear. Ain't that the truth? Yeah, as I say, I mean, I saw this note. Gary had taken a photograph of a note that his daughter had given him some years ago. You know, can you try and make it home for Christmas? We really miss you and stuff like that. I mean, it tugged at my heartstrings, and the note wasn't even to me. So, yeah, I can fully believe it. Mick Saunders, right, boys and girls, the hound wants to pee on every tree on the Isle of Dogs, and I fancy a liquid lunch. Have a good day and stay safe, as always. Mick, get yourself out, but get yourself home before Storm Kieran arrives and blows the Isle of Dogs away. Yeah, that will probably do us. That's an hour and 6 minutes. Shows grow longer by the day. Everybody, don't forget, we have evening shows on the 6th and the 13th of December. First one is going to be our prediction show. Second one is going to be our Dig Fat quiz of the year, for which I do need to start writing questions. It's going to be a lot of questions as well, because I need to fill a sensible amount of time. Be a good thing if the Isle of Dogs gets blown away, maybe. Yeah, stay safe, guys. Have a great day. Yeah, everybody go and have a great day, but do please stay safe. The weather warnings are threatening potential loss of life. So I know I say it in passing every day, stay safe, but seriously, it's going to be bloody horrendous out there. Stay safe, look after yourself, and I'll see you on the morrow. Till then, everybody, have a fantastic day. Tatty bye.